You open your phone. One comment, one sentence, and just like that, your peace is gone. Not because the words were true, but because they got to you. And that's all it takes. They don't need to punch you to win. They just need you to flinch, to react, to lose your center, even for a second. Welcome to the real battlefield. Not a war of fists, a war of opinions, a war of silence, of looks that sting harder than words. This is psychological warfare, and if you don't know the rules, you've already lost. You live in a world designed to provoke you. Clickbait, arguments, passive-aggressive praise. Everyone is fishing for your attention, because your reaction is power, and if they can make you react, they control the narrative. Here's what they never told you. In a world addicted to chaos, calm is rebellion. If you don't shout, if you don't explain, if you don't respond, you become unpredictable, and what's unpredictable becomes dangerous. They won't say it, but your silence terrifies them, because it reflects something they can't control. And worse, something they can't understand. You were taught to be nice, to be kind, to be agreeable, but not once were you taught how to remain centered when everything around you is trying to pull you apart. You're not here to be reactive. You're here to remember who you are, to take back what they keep trying to hijack, your emotional sovereignty. You don't fight chaos with more noise. You defeat it by staying still while everything else trembles. And this video, it won't tell you how to argue better. It will show you how to never need to. Because the most powerful one in any conflict is not the loudest. It's the one who doesn't move yet, moves everyone else. Don't react. Don't explain. Govern. You were never taught how to defend yourself. You were only taught how to feel. Since childhood, you were rewarded for being quiet, praised for being easy. You were called mature for keeping your mouth shut. You learned that being agreeable earned you love, and expressing pain made you a burden, but no one told you the cost. No one told you that every unspoken word becomes an internal scream, that every moment you choose peace over self-respect, you train yourself to disappear. Here's the truth they never told you. Every time you react from emotion, you give away control. Not just over the moment, over your image, over your power, over your future. Emotion, though real, is currency. And in the wrong hands, it's weaponized against you. That's why manipulators don't scream. They whisper. They poke. They comment just enough to provoke you, to make you show your cards. They want to see if you'll bleed, because if you do, they know exactly where to press next. Picture this. You're in a meeting. Someone makes a subtle jab, a line that questions your competence, disguised as a joke. You feel it, the heat in your face, the pressure in your chest. Now pause. You can speak. You can defend. You can fire back and win the moment. But you'll lose the war, because the moment you react emotionally, they've got you. They know you can be controlled. Think of a battlefield. The first soldier who panics, who fires blindly, who charges without reading the terrain, is the first one to fall. And most people live like that, running on emotional autopilot, firing their energy in every direction, hoping someone notices their pain. You may think you're strong because you always speak up, because you always set the record straight. But if your strength depends on reaction, it's not strength, it's exposure. And the more reactive you are, the easier you are to predict. And what's predictable is controllable. This is where calm becomes terrifying. Because the calm person, the one who doesn't flinch, Who doesn't rise to bait? Who doesn't blink? Is unreadable. And in a world that survives by pushing your buttons, being unreadable is power. You may think silence is weak, but silence is strategic ambiguity. It creates doubt. It creates tension. It holds the room hostage. Most people aren't afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your silence. Because silence reflects. It reveals. It forces them to confront themselves. Without your emotional energy to distract them. That's the battlefield they never expected. Where the strongest punch is the one that never lands. Because it never needed to. You think you're proving your strength by reacting, but Machiavelli would say this: a man who cannot govern himself cannot govern others. And self-governance starts here. In the 2 seconds before you open your mouth. In the 1 second before you raise your eyebrow. In the half second before your heart beats faster. It starts with choice. Ask yourself, how many times have I handed my power away just to feel seen for 5 seconds? How many times have I spoken from my wound and not from my wisdom? Because every provocation is a test, not of your intelligence, not of your opinions, but of your axis. And until you learn to stay on that axis, no title, no knowledge, no success will protect you. They will pull you apart, not with fists, but with suggestion, insults dressed as jokes, compliments dipped in poison. And when that moment comes, don't fight for dominance. Just breathe, just pause, and let the silence speak for you. Because the person who reacts is controlled, but the person who pauses is king. And if this hits something deep in you, if you've ever given away your power just to feel seen, then like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks reacting is strength, because they deserve to know. The real power is in the pause. We've been lied to. For generations, they told us strength is loud, that the one who speaks first, the one who speaks fast, the one who speaks the most, wins. They told us the room belongs to the voice that fills it. But that's not strength. That's theater. That's noise. Pretending to be power. Real strength doesn't compete for attention. It doesn't scramble to be seen. It doesn't fight to be understood. It chooses silence, not as retreat, but as dominance. Because silence forces others to face themselves. And most people can't survive that. Look around you. Everyone wants to be heard. No one wants to be still. Why? Because stillness is uncomfortable. In the stillness, your own voice echoes back at you. And that's where truth lives. In the sound, you can't drown out with more words. But the louder you get, the more you reveal, the faster you respond, the more predictable you become. And predictable people are tools, not threats. Power isn't in the noise you make. It's in the effect you create when you say nothing. Think of it. The generals who win wars aren't the ones shouting on the front lines. They're the ones watching from the hilltop, quiet, observing, waiting, seeing what others can't. Because when everyone is talking, the one who listens rules. You've seen it in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in relationships, in politics. The ones who stay composed, centered, emotionless. They change outcomes without lifting a finger. Because stillness makes people uneasy. And unease is leverage. When you're loud, people know where you are. They know what you think. They know how to strike you. But when you are unreadable, you become a storm behind a closed door. Everyone senses it. No one knows when it will hit. That's why those who remain calm in conflict are feared. Because calm is unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. They can't control what they can't decode. They can't fight what doesn't react. You don't have to shout to dominate a room. Sometimes, all it takes is walking in and saying nothing. Letting your presence do the talking. Letting the tension build. Letting the silence choke out their arrogance. And the moment they start explaining themselves to you, just to fill the void you've created, that's when you know you've won. But don't confuse silence with passivity, and don't mistake calm for softness. Silence is a blade, precision sharp, deadly when controlled. Machiavelli understood this. He once wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good. He must know when to use cruelty, and when to appear kind. Appear, not be, because appearance controls perception, and perception controls everything. So let them think you're cold. Let them call you distant. Let them say you're hard to read. They fear what they can't understand. They attack what they can't control. And what they don't realize is that's the point. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be respected, to be remembered, to be unshakable. So let the loud fight each other. Let them burn in their need to be heard. You stay still. You stay quiet. And you become the one they can't predict. Because when strength looks like silence and power feels like restraint, the world starts to notice, even when you say nothing at all. Control isn't about dominance. It's about direction, not of others, of yourself. Because in every confrontation, the real war isn't outside. It's internal. And whoever wins that war wins everything else. You may think you're being tested by others, but you're not. You're being tested by yourself, by the part of you that still wants to react, still wants to be right, still wants to prove. And that's the battlefield where most people lose. Not because they lack strength, but because they lack control, because they confuse noise with authority, reaction with relevance. Here's what most people don't realize. Every provocation is a trap. It's a setup to pull you off center, to drag you out of your frame, to make you abandon yourself in the name of ego. The question is not, are you strong enough to fight back? The real question is, are you strong enough to stay still when everything in you wants to explode? Imagine this. You're in a room. Someone throws shade. They insult you. Undermine you. Everyone's watching, waiting for your response. And you do nothing. You just look. Not with anger. Not with fear. With stillness. With clarity. With a calm that unsettles the air. You don't have to say a word, because the most terrifying thing in that room is your refusal to break character. That's self-control, not suppression. Command. Because people who can't control themselves will always try to control you. They provoke to test your stability. They poke to see if you'll crack. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your reaction. You don't owe them your emotions, your energy, your voice. They haven't earned it. And you should stop giving it away so freely. Silence is not weakness. It's a weapon. It's a mirror. And when you hold it up, people see themselves and they panic. Because they expected you to fight. They expected you to rage. They expected you to prove something, but you didn't. And that terrifies them. Because in that moment, they no longer know who you are. And in not knowing, they lose control. That's psychological warfare. Not through threats, not through words, but through the stillness that exposes the chaos in others. And it's not just in arguments. This shows up in relationships, in meetings, in family dinners, when someone tries to provoke you just to feel powerful, just to feel smarter, just to feel seen. But when you don't give them what they want, you flip the entire script. They thought they were the director. Suddenly, They realize you've been writing the story the whole time. That's what calm does. It doesn't fight the battle. It redefines it. It says, you don't control my rhythm. You don't dictate my response. I see you, and that's enough. It's a silent refusal, a rejection of the emotional game. And the longer you hold your ground, the more the room bends around your axis. The more people start to orbit you, instead of you reacting to them. You want to know what true power feels like. It's standing in front of chaos, and not flinching. It's watching someone try to trigger you and choosing not to blink. Because that decision, that pause, that breath, that's where power lives. Self-control doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing judgment. You stop needing to be anything other than unshakably you. And from that place, you don't rise in anger. You rise in presence, in posture, in silence, and in a world built on noise. That silence is deafening. Here's what no one tells you. The ego doesn't fear being wrong. It fears being invisible. It doesn't need to be right. It just needs to be seen, to be acknowledged. That's why silence drives people insane. Because silence isn't just quiet. It's the death of the ego's voice. You've seen this before. Someone attacks you. Maybe online. Maybe in public. Maybe in private. But with an audience watching, they don't want the truth. They want a reaction. They want to feel your ego rise. They want to see you flinch. But what happens when you just look at them? No defense. No outburst. No panics. Just stillness. Just presence. Just breath. The ego inside them begins to scream. Because you didn't feed it. And, like a starving animal, it turns inward. It starts to devour itself. The ego is addicted to escalation. It feeds on chaos. It needs to argue, needs to explain, needs to be the one who wins. But you're no longer playing that game. You're not in the ring. You're watching from above. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not defending your ego. You're dismantling theirs. Stillness does something terrifying. It reflects. It exposes. It shows people what they've been hiding by making noise. And most people can't handle that. They need you to lose your center so they can find theirs. They need your reaction to justify their instability. When you don't give it to them, you force them to look inward. And most people haven't done that in years. If ever. That's why they leave. That's why they ghost. That's why they explode. Not because you were cruel, but because you were calm. And in a world of emotional chaos, calm is the most violent mirror you can hold up to someone. Let's be honest. You've done it too. You've reacted. You've defended. You've fought to be heard, even when you didn't need to. Not because you were right, but because your ego was afraid to be forgotten. That's not weakness. That's programming. It's human. But it's also the reason you still felt empty after winning. Why you still felt wrong after being right. Because the ego never wants peace. It only wants the next battle, the next performance, the next applause. So here's the shift. The moment you stop reacting to protect the ego, you start acting to protect your energy. You stop proving. You stop over-explaining. You stop bleeding just to show that you care. Now you move with clarity. You speak with intention. You love with boundaries. You realize you can still care deeply and still walk away. That's where detachment becomes elegance. Not abandonment, but alignment. You don't detach because you don't feel. You detach because you've learned the cost of feeling for those who only want to feed off it. When you're reactive, you're not choosing, You're being chosen by their behavior, by their chaos, by their insecurity, but when you detach with awareness, you regain choice. You choose what deserves your breath. You choose when to speak, when to stay, when to walk. That's not disconnection. That's evolution. You don't stop feeling. You just stop folding. You don't stop giving. You stop leaking. And in that choice, you become someone new. Not cold, not cruel, just clear. Clear on what you allow. Clear on what you protect. Clear on who you are when no one else is pulling the strings. That's not ego. That's mastery. Being calm sounds noble until you feel the price. Because the moment you stop reacting, you start losing people. Fast. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them control you. You stopped explaining yourself, stopped proving your intentions, stopped playing the emotional game. And suddenly, you're the problem. They say you've changed. You're distant. You're cold. But here's the truth. You didn't change. You just stopped leaking energy into conversations that drained you. You stopped chasing validation from people who only loved the emotional version of you they could manipulate. You became calm. And that calm, that presence, it unsettled them. Because they didn't want connection. They wanted control. And they used chaos to get it. So when you no longer reacted to their chaos, when you didn't panic, didn't chase, didn't respond on cue, you broke the pattern. And when the pattern breaks, they fall apart. Because your reaction was their structure. And now, there's nothing holding it up. This is the cost of calm. The lonelier path. The quiet exits. The misunderstood boundaries. People don't just leave because you were unkind. They leave because you became unreadable. They don't know how to control what they can't decode. But don't mistake their departure for your failure. It's not a punishment. It's a filter. A way to separate those who were feeding off your instability from those who truly saw you. And yes, it hurts. You'll question yourself. You'll feel guilt. You'll wonder if you should have softened your stance. But remember this. Machiavelli once said, "He who builds his house on the applause of others builds it on sand." Let the waves come. Let the noise rise. Let people leave. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be solid. You don't need everyone to like you. You need to be able to live with yourself when you're alone. That's real peace. And it's rare. Most people live off attention. They need the noise, the arguments, the validation loops. You don't. Not anymore. Because your calm is no longer weakness. It's resistance. You don't flinch at provocation. You don't offer your energy to those who haven't earned it. And that makes you dangerous in all the right ways. So when they say you've changed, just smile. They're right. You changed the rules. You stopped playing. And now, you're not in the game. You're writing the next one. Without losing your humanity. There's a lie that's been told to you, that if you detach, you become cold, unfeeling, cruel, that if you stop responding, you stop caring. But that's not detachment. That's disconnection. True detachment isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. It's the ability to stand in the fire of feeling without letting it consume your reason. You still feel. You still care. You still love. But you no longer abandon yourself to do it. You no longer betray your boundaries just to avoid discomfort. You don't chase people who treat your value like a discount tag. This is where emotional maturity lives. Not in how loud you speak, but in how quiet you remain when someone tries to provoke you. Not in how fast you respond, but in how deeply you breathe before choosing what to say. Because in detachment, you don't stop being human. You become fully human, fully awake, fully sovereign. You stop letting wounds speak for you. You stop letting old scripts dictate your current responses. You stop bleeding in the same places you used to bandage others. And yes, some will call you distant. Some will say you've become too logical, too composed. But what they're really saying is, they no longer know how to pull you out of yourself. They no longer have access to the levers they used to push, because now you're centered, you're observing, you're acting from clarity. You've realized that not every emotion deserves a response. Not every trigger is your responsibility. Not every relationship is worth the internal cost. This is where you stop leaking, where your boundaries stop being suggestions and become non-negotiables, where silence becomes your most fluent language. Because now, you don't explain your detachment, you embody it. You don't argue about your peace. You protect it. You don't run from connection. You just refuse to lose yourself inside of it. And if they can't meet you there, you let them go. Not with resentment, with respect. Because you no longer bond through wounds. You bond through vision, through alignment, through reciprocity. And you've outgrown the need to be everything for everyone. Now you choose to be whole for yourself. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's the kind of detachment Machiavelli would call strength. Not ruthless, just wise. Because when you know your value, you no longer negotiate it just to be seen. You don't chase what runs. You don't explain what's obvious. You don't beg to be understood. You just remain. Calm, whole, untouched. And that, in a world that feeds on reactivity, is radical. Look around. The loudest ones are everywhere. The ones who interrupt, who need the last word. The spotlight, the applause. They win attention. They win arguments. They win for a moment. But what happens after? They burn out. They self-destruct because their power depends on being seen. And that kind of power never lasts. Now look at the calm ones. They don't talk much. They don't chase noise. They walk into a room and something changes. People lower their voice. They straighten their posture. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Respect. Because calm carries weight. And here's why. Calmness, control. Not just of your voice, of your mind, your emotions, your decisions. The calm one doesn't react. They assess, they calculate, they choose when to act. And because of that, they last. While others fight for dominance, they build empires quietly. While others waste energy defending themselves, they invest that energy in vision. Calm isn't passive. It's surgical. It cuts through the noise. It moves when it's time. And when it moves, it doesn't miss. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved." If you cannot be both. But the calm one doesn't need to choose. They command both without asking for either, because calm isn't empty. It's full of unseen strength. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need explanation. That doesn't ask for permission. And that's why the calm one wins in the end, because they didn't burn bridges just to prove a point. They walked over them when others weren't watching. They didn't shout. They listened. They didn't panic. They planned. So when the storm came, they were already 5 steps ahead, not by accident, by design. Calm is the art of letting fools destroy themselves while you preserve your energy. It's how you survive the fire without becoming ash. It's how you rise without needing to climb over anyone. In a world built on dopamine, on outrage, on validation. Calm is rebellion. Calm is strategy. Calm is legacy. Because the calm ones don't win by chance. They win because they never stopped seeing the long game, even when the world tried to blind them with noise. That's not silence. That's vision. Every second, something is trying to steal your attention. A notification, a headline, a glance, a tone of voice. The world is addicted to speed, to outrage, to noise. And in that chaos, the one who stays still becomes a ghost in the system. They can't predict you. They can't provoke you. They can't manipulate you because you don't react on demand. And that makes you powerful in a way most people can't understand. Stillness is not absence. It is presence. It is the art of holding your ground when everything is shaking. It is the ability to let others flail while you observe from a place of deep alignment. Stillness doesn't mean weakness. It means you don't hand over your energy just because the world demands a performance. And it confuses them, because most people rely on your reaction to feel real. They push your buttons to see if you'll break, to see if you still belong to the system. But you've unplugged. You're not here to win arguments. You're here to hold presence. And that is a different kind of war. Because the moment you stop feeding the fire of reactivity, the flames die on their own. And people panic. They don't know how to control what they can't engage. Your stillness becomes a mirror. They see themselves, their desperation, their chaos, their need to be heard, validated, obeyed. But you remain. Not because you don't care, but because you care deeply about your inner state. Because you understand this world rewards the reactive but is ruled by the composed. In stillness, you reclaim your autonomy. You move when it's right, not when it's loud. You speak when it's needed, not when it's expected. And when you do, every word cuts through the fog like a blade, because it came from stillness, from intention, from clarity. Machiavelli didn't say, "Make noise." He said, "Make moves." Quietly. And when everyone else is shouting, that quiet move is what breaks the game. So let them react. Let them scream. Let them demand. You are not in the storm. You are the eye, the center, the place nothing touches. And that is power. Most people spend their lives chasing something. Validation, revenge, recognition, victory. But when you master calm, you stop chasing because you realize you are the victory. Not because you won the fight, but because you no longer needed it. You don't need to prove your worth. You are your own proof. You don't need applause. You walk in silence. And the world adjusts its volume. That's the difference. Reactive people demand respect. Calm people command it. Without a word, without force. Just presence. Because calm is not a pause. It's a posture. A decisión. To choose alignment over approval. To choose inner peace over external dominance. When someone attacks, you don't flinch. You don't perform. You don't rush to defend. You look them in the eye and remain still. That's stillness. It speaks louder than anything they could throw at you. It says, "I see your chaos. I will not become it. I feel your storm, but I will not drown in it. I hear your anger, but I will not echo it." You've become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you built depth. Depth in your thinking, in your presence, in your ability to stay grounded no matter who tries to pull you off balance. This is when you stop being part of the game and start becoming the one who shapes it. Machiavelli taught that control comes from perception, but the deepest control comes from self-mastery, because when others act from fear, you act from clarity. When they move from impulse, you move from purpose. And that's the real power. Not being louder, not being faster, but being unshaken when the noise rises. You no longer seek to win. You redefine what winning is. Not domination, but freedom. Freedom from reaction, from chaos, from the exhausting need to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't chase the throne. You become the pillar. You don't demand attention. You hold space. You don't fight every battle. You outlast the war. Because you know now victory doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being unbreakable even when no one is watching. That's calm. That's power. That's who you've become. Now listen closely, because this part is not for the crowd. It's for the few, the rare ones, the ones who made it this far. If you're still here, you've already begun. You've felt the shift, not outside, but inside, a part of you older than your fears, wiser than your wounds is waking up. You're not here to explain yourself anymore, not here to seek permission, not here to play the emotional chessboard of people who never deserved your energy. You are here to govern, not through dominance, but through discipline, not through noise, but through presence. You are not a reaction. You are an axis. You are not here to survive their storm. You are here to become the calm that ends it. And yes, they will try to pull you back. With guilt, with drama, with chaos. But you won't move. Not because you're hard, but because you've seen too much to be soft in the wrong places. You don't fight for power anymore, because now you understand. Real power is not loud. It's not disparity. It's not emotional. It breathes slowly, speaks rarely, moves intentionally, and when it moves, the world listens. So walk forward, not to be seen, but to see more clearly. Don't respond. Don't explain. Don't break. Remain. And remember this: the one who governs themselves needs no throne. The one who controls their emotions already rules the world. In silence, without warning, without applause, just by standing still, while everything else falls apart. Goodbye, architect of calm. Until the next storm,